Hello there, and welcome to the value of everything. So, here today we are going to embark on a little bit of a strange thought experiment in terms of I would like to try and put forward a political party. However, this political party is sort of let's say, anti-political party in the first place. So it is a bit of a paradox in itself, but um, let's just give it a go anyway. Why not? It's no real big harm. A thought doesn't do anybody too much harm, really, I guess. So what I'm putting forward here is the terms and conditions that say if we were going to acquire political power to remove it. So a little bit of a strange one there, and like if you go back down to the philosophy of Batman, to what was the word? What was the word? To conquer fear, you must become fear. Probably not quite sounding as masculine as Batman there, but yeah, that is exactly the way it should be. Well, maybe that's exactly the way that it should be done. We shouldn't be strange, weird anarchists smashing up McDonald's, but applying ourselves potentially to the political movement. I know it. Obviously, if you're an anarchist and you try and put on the suit and you try and maneuver yourself once into the domain of politics, then you potentially are succumbing to the worlds of corruption and backhanders and emotions. So people need to be very wary of these things. But let's just see how this potential thing could happen. So, this obviously that doesn't really matter which country it happens in or anything like that. Before I start as well, this isn't anarchism in the sense of a socialist anarchist state, which still requires some kind of authority or some person inside of the system to control everything. But there will be some certain agreements, I would say, that need to be put in place and can be fixed in place nowadays with a few ideas. Now, I haven't really. I was trying to think on these ideas to quite depth. So I was trying to think of one chess move ahead of another chess move ahead of another chess move. But it was. I think it was tiredness more so than anything else. But if you are listening in, if you've got any sort of knockdowns or extra add-on theories to what I'm saying here, then we can continue further. I have made a certain few decent podcasts which have described certain levels of this stuff, and I think I'm sort of amalgamating a lot of this information, or well, not information, but these theories together. Obviously, a lot of these theories I've adapted from other people, Milton Friedman, Stefan Molyneux, all those people that I've heard on the past. I'm just readapting it and just adding a few little twists here and there. It's not really all my brilliant, bright ideas, but there's just a few little nuances which I'm adding to the mix. All right. So, obviously, the main thing is obviously the political party which acquires power to remove power. Now, this is obviously a little bit of a libertarian idea in itself. Minarchist. The minarchist system is to come into power and just basically reduce the size of the state, lower the taxation system, let the country flourish and have the free market capitalist system, all the wealth generators really free to exercise the liberal powers to invent and be entrepreneurs. So, yeah, that would be very fantastic. Now, obviously, this political party is not really going to get too much in the way of political funding. It's really going to be destroyed from the onset because if you really require political funding, you what do you need? You need the corptocracy or the corporations to start piling in a load of money to you. Now, you see, with a non-state society, that really goes fundamentally against the corporation in itself. It's a real big problem. You're not going to get much money, maybe from the people, but you're not really going to get it from many other places. And also, you're not going to get it from the labour union movement either, because they're looking at using powers of the state to get their workers' ways. So both sides of the scale, really, you're not going to get any kind of, say, old aristocracy sort of, what's the word? It's not really aristocracy, but just like old money or old channels of revenue going into your political funding campaign. Potentially, it might be new ways of funding, maybe like the new systems like crowdfunding and things like that. You might be able to get a certain, let's say, a certain decent amount of people funding, but obviously you're not going to get the billionaires who own the corporations or anything like that. That's going to really fill out your campaign. And you're also not going to get the old establishment politicians and all those minds who have been in the game and know all the ways to move and shake. They're not going to be in your party either. So you really got just some very, shall we say, people that are putting their heads on the in the guillotine, and really all they're going to put themselves under is a lot of exercise, a lot of anguish, a lot of basically like people will be throwing rotten tomatoes at them and saying, "Oh, this is horrible. This can't work. These are the enemy." Like you're going to get it from both sides of the political spectrum. Every side is, well, potentially at first, I guess if it's a political party, it's like the common thing, you're going to get ignored first, then they're going to sort of take the mickey out of you. There's those different stages which happen. So it's going to be a very, very big uphill struggle with 0 to none joyous moments at the start, or even when you've won. It really even just gets a little bit harder once you've won. So when I say win, I mean win political power. So it really is extremely poor. But there is certain things on your side. You potentially have things like the youth, the disenchanted, the you're going to get people that are independent, entrepreneurial, sort of hard-working people that realize that the balance of power is getting very much distributed out of their hands and into others' pockets. Then it's basically the middle class, the working class. All of those people you really should be getting their kind of backing, because you are really fundamentally empowering the wealth generators, the people that are going to work and creating stuff and being productive. And really, once you empower the productive, then you can make more production, which improves the status of the economy. So, yeah, if you're looking to start this political party, you may have very, shall we say, motivated people that have got the correct sort of motivation to get involved, but the financial incentives are not there. There's no initial financial incentive. There may be some kind of virtuous, altruistic incentive for you to do something which may potentially give you something of credit when you die after 100 years. Who knows what really is so sort of ambiguous exactly what you're gonna achieve in your lifetime. But for the process of going through the political parties and putting forward, I haven't really mentioned the show title. It's basically putting forward the anarchist political or anarcho-capitalist political party is really going to be an incredible struggle and is going to have little to none rewards in the present to not too distant future, but maybe if you're really lucky and you can live to a ripe old age, you may see some very beautiful things occur. Right. So, the first thing, obviously, what you would need to do is if you had to, obviously, gain popular vote democracy. And this is obviously a little bit of a problem because you are really, in essence, a little bit anti-democracy. But you would have to at least say that we have to demonstrate that we can achieve this this paradigm. We have to get the greater majority of people to vote for us, and then we will. Once we get into power, then we need to basically destroy democracy. I know it sounds incredibly poor and incredibly bad to destroy the human right to vote for the certain power that they require, but they need to go into power to destroy democracy. But I'll just sort of explain, potentially, this is a way in which it can happen. So, once the let's say just for an example, they come into power, and then the political party will state, okay, so the anarchist, anarcho-capitalist party will state, okay, right, now that we're in power, we have to state that there will be a diminishment of basically democracy as time goes on. So you sort of understand what I'm saying here. There will be some kind of politics which can occur, but I'll show you exactly how that can occur in certain ways. Now, in terms of property ownerships and everything else, this is how everything gets intertwined now. So they come into power. The first thing that they would need to do is sell all government property. And when I say government property, we need to sell all land, we need to sell all airspace, we need to sell all seas or areas of seas around the land area. Everything needs to be sold, but maybe just keeping a few government department buildings in place which do provide certain bureaucracies and services to like the elderly and stuff like that. So everything starts to go on sale. So the obvious things, obviously, is anything that's not land released. Any land that's not been released has to be sold straight away. And you would have to ask, what is being sold here, and how is it being sold? What's the methods of being sold? It's being sold, and everything else. Now, this comes into the equation of using technology. Now, there is a technologic thing which is going on here, which people may think, maybe we shouldn't be really putting all of the eggs in the basket of some technologic system which potentially could be turned into Terminator and destroy the world. But it's not necessarily that we're putting it into a technological superior artificial intelligence. It is a pre-programmed system, like the books of The Rights of Americans. We can have the same sort of system in terms of a structured online registry of ownership. Now, okay, this sounds very, very strange already to you. I must admit it does. But how we approach this now is that we have systems in place like Bitcoin, and there is a ledger system, an accounting ledger, and a monetary system which can work side by side. So there is definite systems in place which work on these bases. And it really is just secured by the methods of mathematics itself, just something that humans created a few Oh, not sure. I think the Muslims actually created it quite some time ago. Anyway, or advanced mathematics. I'm sure everyone could count at some point in time. But so this cryptography or this mathematics, these numbers which are hard to crack, impossible equations or impossible combinations of numbers which are hard to crack, like a password, trying to hack an account, is almost impenetrable in a government system. And imagine if, now when I say government system, I'm not saying that there is a ruling force, I'm saying that there is a voluntary force. Now the problem is that obviously where an anarchist party has come to power, they are putting in a system which is shutting down a ruling elite and putting in place a online ledger instead. Now it sounds pretty boring in any way what they're doing, but they're actually installing property ownership, and if it's cryptographied as well, so that nobody can hack or change or steal anybody else's wealth, that property ownership is secured by numbers itself. So it is sort of a system which can be fairly watertight. The next thing, which I'm sure that corporations won't like too much, but the next thing is that people need to be registered on the property ownership, and people are property itself. So you would need to state that somebody is an item or a valued item on that system. So I have to register myself, everybody else has to register themselves. You could say maybe they're an account holder, but they are a registered asset on the system, on the ledger of accounting. I am trying to put forward the value of everything, so I'm not stating that everybody is just some monetary value, but I'm saying that everything does have an all-encompassing value anyway, so we may as well put on ourselves. We obviously there's a lot of potential and value which we can all create ourselves by our own human production, which is unlimitless, but we do need to be registered on a certain register. I know this is obviously, it doesn't go into the grain of voluntarism, but this does sort of go in the grain of, you can choose not to obviously register at all, and I will go into that in a little bit. But if there is the registry of you going onto the system, and there is an accounting ledger of everything that is potentially owned, so you can put all your cars on there, you can put your house, your land, all major goods. I'm sure probably little crappy goods you wouldn't even bother because it's not even really worth reclaiming if it was lost. But in general, you can put your, when you go down to the shops, you can go to Coles, any shops, anywhere. You can basically, Walmart, wherever you go, you can basically use this ownership ledger, which will account that ownership from one side to the other. Now, when I say ownership, obviously, I said, okay, it cannot be, you can't register a corporation on the machine as an owner. Now, there's a defining point here, which I'm saying here is that you cannot create these legally protected entities by the state to protect them from any sort of litigations or anything like that. What there has to be is there has to be ownership in terms of the business. Now, the thing of which you would have to do that with corporations is you would have to have a registry of a business on this ledger by the shareholders. So the shareholders all would be part owners of a company. So if you had to put a corporation onto that system, all the shareholders would be on that system. But also, this is the problem. This is not a problem. This is actually one of the good things about this system, is that all those shareholders would be liable for any problems which occur. So there is, in effect, by this ownership system which is kicking in, all shareholders are liable if that company does any wrongdoing. So you can see a system of potentially people going, I'm going to be making sure that I select very, very much more ethical companies which do not pollute, which do not commit crimes, anything like that, or any moral crimes, to ensure that I am not liable on this accounting ledger for any problems which occur. Now, all right, so I'm setting up this system here, okay? So we have a lot more questions raised before we even can go any further, really, with this political party, because it's so much, really, just to put... Imagine if you try to explain this to the voting public in general. It's just... You'd have to break it down so simply and really just shine the light of freedoms and everything else. But just to talk about this public accounting ledger really would probably bore the general public in itself. Hopefully I'm not doing that to you. But so it's... You do have this this point, and you would need to have a certain level of a creation for this in itself. So I do ask anybody who can produce any freeware or any what's the word for Bitcoin? I can't remember what the word for Bitcoin is, but basically anything where somebody can take over and start working on the script, and somebody else can take over, and yada yada yada. So, okay, so this can be paid for as well by the sale of the basically the fire sale of all basically non-essential government-owned buildings and land releases, everything else. Okay, so that's one of the other important things, and obviously one thing in this this system of the accounting ledger is that it needs to have the capability to have a lot of outreach. So one of the most important factors of this accounting ledger of ownership, so we are specifying here that people are self-empowered, people own certain things, people own companies or shares of companies, people own land, airspace, people own everything that's potentially can be owned. So property rights are completely enforced. There's not some ambiguity between some government that can pollute the air or some energy company that can pollute the government's air. Everybody owns everything. So there is a liability between each one of those people who are on the accounting ledger. If I destroy somebody else's property, then they will be able to get it back, be able to litigate back against me. But we need to have, obviously, the security of this accounting ledger to ensure that it all comes into place. Okay, so yeah, just to mention on this accounting ledger that this obviously needs to have a lot of combinations in terms of a valuation or a monetary system which is inbuilt into that. Potentially, this is a very tricky area as well, that there may be things like value dependent on insurance, things like that. So people can be valued based upon the potential of their entrepreneurialism, anything else like that. They might have certain economic value over other people. I'm not quite sure where I'm going on this one, but there may be certain things which derive it. And I think this may come down to insurance. I know it sounds a little bit weird and a little bit mechanical and dog eat dog and survival of the fittest, but I guess if we're insuring people, I'm going to be insured for a lot less than what Bill Gates is. It's just one of those things in a monetary system where people do derive more value than others. So I think there will be that sort of area of things. So if anybody causes damages against another person, there is all these little elements which come into place. And insurance is an incredibly important factor if you're thinking of creating any computer software systems which are based around insurance and value systems which can go into credits of goodwill and everything else. That might be very important technology which we may need to use in the future. So, yeah, so where we put in this accounting ledger, there needs to be this connection between monetary value, there needs to be insurance, ratings, there needs to be a lot of ethical connections which go on into this accounting ledger. Not to say that it will need to be built into the accounting ledger, but just it may need to be sort of considered when things need to be built on top of the accounting ledger. So maybe not rewritten, but the system needs to be rewritten at any point in time, but people need to work with it and make adaptations to it. Also, there is going to be certain things of the economy the democracy, which may still need to be in action. The greater good still might need to be in power to a certain very limited state, whereby I think actually it will be like a complete majority vote. Anybody who is on the accounting ledger will need to have some kind of voting system if the system needs to be upgraded, any changes need to be made, a number of software designers need to work in collaboration with each other just to make sure that one isn't putting some dodgy code in so that they can switch all the ownership to them. But if they do something like that, then they destroy the entire system, and I think that would obviously not really work out too well for them itself. But there would need to be obviously this majority voting system, which can be built into this accounting ledger as well. So basically, these anarcho-capitalists are basically people that are putting forward a piece of software, really, more so than anything else, to replace the government. And it's a system in which people can install property rights and be in a voluntary free trade environment where there isn't any force of the state in collaboration with corporations, or force of the state in collaboration to trade unions. So, or anybody else that puts money in the pockets of government to give them political favours. So you can see what I can say there. I mean, it's like there is some certain. It's not like people are being governed, but there is a certain level of an agreement which is going on, and obviously the democratic right to say, okay, right, we want to go onto this accounting ledger. That is the majority rule. Some people might disagree with it, but obviously they're saying that they would rather get money from the forced redistribution of wealth rather than an accounting ownership ledger system where people can freely trade without any government interference. So yeah, that's just one of a very important, and probably the most important levels of the anarchist or anarcho-capitalist party coming into power. Next up would be this fire sale. Now, this fire sale is very important because there's going to be obviously a big chest of money, which I probably imagine in today's day and age, we need to probably pay off debts. So as a government is going to shut down, the government will need to pay off debts. And probably the first thing that it would need to do is pay off to the debtors. This is a little bit problematic, but you obviously can't just not pay off your debts. A lot of the bonds that have been sold into the market have been bought by other countries. You cannot really start disturbing the other countries too much. Hopefully, a lot of governments are in a situation where they can pay off with the fire sale of all their land assets and air assets and everything else, which I imagine they probably could. But this is is a very tender point, and there is a balancing of the budget. If you push your government to such a degree, then there may be a problem. But obviously, there might be an issue. There might be a situation as well where the government is completely bankrupt or completely hyperinflated, so that they cannot even pay off any of the debtors anymore, so that it can convert over to the anarcho-capitalist system. Okay, so let's say this is one scenario that plays out, that there is a fire sale of all the assets of the government, and therefore there is a certain level of funding which is left over. Now, let's say, for example, you have right. So let's say, for example, that there is a big trough of leftover of foreign reserves. So you have foreign reserves in your trough, or your current account, your country's current account, is now really paid off its debts, and it's got this surplus of money left over from all the fire sale of all the assets which has been sold onto the market. Oh yeah, just one thing as well, just for identity purposes with ownership. When you get registered, I know this is another little Orwellian thing which people might be a bit afraid of, but as it's a voluntary system with no actual governance itself, I don't think there's too much to be afraid of here. But there needs to be extremely unique identification measures which enable you to be registered on the accounting ledger. Therefore, it will require probably something in the degree of the most unique identification, like DNA or something else, or fingerprints or whatever else that is required to ensure that you are fundamentally unique and identified as an individual. Okay, so that's one of the very important factors there. I know there's an entire massive legal thing around this as well, but that's just a very important factor. I'm not an identification specialist or anything like that of how it can be done, but I guess people can be given a code or some kind of a login and password which is unique to them as a unique identifier. But it's important that there is some kind of override system where they need to acquire their ownership back or put a freeze on their account, whatever they need to do in a rapid sense. They need to have an ability to say that I am who I am, and for that there needs to be fundamental identification which occurs there. Sorry for that little tangent, but it is important. All right, okay. So yeah, we're talking about the current account of the country. So whatever's left over on the balance of all the debts being paid off. Hopefully there is some money left over. And what we're going to do with that money. So obviously, what's going to be happening at this point is there needs to be a gradual. Let's say that there is a surplus, and I imagine that most countries, if they started to sell all the land in the country, there would be an incredible amount of wealth there. If you think of, say, for example, Greece selling all their islands, I'm sure that would pay off a lot of the debt and have a little bit more left over for them once they start selling the island and the airspace and everything else. There is definite wealth there that can be purchased. I think we do potentially have an issue in terms of a potential. Let me just put this theory out there, and people can explore this later. If people are starting to purchase these things, what am I saying? If people are starting to purchase all these assets on credit expansion, and this is like globalized credit expansion and everything else, then there may be some issues for other countries down the line who try to adopt this system because of the lack or the inability of credit expansion in the future for the other countries that adopt it a little bit later. I don't know exactly if I'm right on this theory, but there might be some issues there. But if we say that the country, that the anarchist system that is just going to employ Bitcoin as their monetary system, some kind of voluntary measure which is already installed, it has got like wide-ranging global connections, they might as well just adopt something like Bitcoin, but they can obviously do something a little bit more out there, or something that might have different systems. Everybody can choose any currency they want to choose. There is obviously different ways, but let's just say, for example, it doesn't really matter too much. There is a current account based upon a number of different accounting measures. There may be some gold, there may be some Bitcoins, there may be some Chinese yuan, there may be some US dollars. Whoever knows what is going to be in this capital account. And obviously a lot of the ownership and registries is going in to people or individuals of that land. It's obviously also an important factor that if people want to get registered and they're foreign buyers as well, they have to come over and then get themselves completely scanned to ensure that they are the owner of that account and become connected onto that account ledger. The other thing I mentioned as well is that where we have this ownership system which comes into place, it's because obviously you're just shutting down a country and replacing it for something else, and you're putting yourself on an ownership ledger instead. This is universalized. It doesn't really matter too much if another country wants to adopt the same technology or use the same system, the exact same network as like a peer-to-peer network as what your country's used as well. And they can just connect onto that server or the network and start adapting themselves to use that measure as well. So just another important thing to note that maybe it can happen in the very small island countries, and then we can see that potentially seeing that they've got extreme, they're doing pretty well, even though they might not have quite the resources, they might still be doing pretty well. Then you can potentially see that there might be further and further more adoption to larger countries and larger countries still, and then adoption may happen quite rapidly. There may be some good people that need to think about the theories as to what would happen with like a lot of small countries or medium-sized countries adopting this, whilst some large state countries are still in power. It's interesting to see exactly what happens there. So there is let's go back to the nest egg of money. So there is a current account of the government, and the government has now a very restricted, limited ownership of assets, and potentially what you need to have rewritten into the ownership of the government state itself is that there would be a potential for that government to basically start shutting down departments and shutting down certain areas of government agencies. Now, you could see that the Democratic voted party. So let's say, for example, the Anarchist Party are in place now. They would have obviously certain levels of power in terms of this pot. Okay. So this pot potentially could be pre-written or pre-connected into the accounting ledger to literally just basically once that a pot has been shut down, the accounting ledger is basically just going to shut down the government in, let's say, 20 years or 30 years, whatever. Let's just sort of consider that potentially retirees might have not had the opportunity to save any money before the complete shutdown of government systems like pension funds and things like that. So let's just put that into consideration there. There may be a connection here with this current account, which is got foreign reserves on it. It is part of the ledger, but it is going to decline over time, and there'll be dwindling assets eventually until you get to a point where there is nothing more to manage, and there is an entire anarchic state, well, not state, there's an entire anarchic area where people are on an accounting ledger where they can freely trade from one side to the other. So what would need to obviously be happening at this point is that the government would be, or the anarchic political party would be the first people in power. Hopefully, if they're quite good with their money and they can't think of any major ways and schemes in which they can work a way to get their hands on the money and squander it for themselves, or do something very like backhandery. I don't know how that could be worked, but this is obviously the major problem of government itself. Maybe the people with the correct moral agency probably have got the best idea. Maybe the anarchists may be the best best people to manage the money. But let's say, for example, that they have a specific budget every year which dwindles down year after year, dependent on the surplus, or the pool of money which has been made by the sale of all government assets. This is incredibly important. You're going to have a situation where obviously people need to be fed. Some people need to be fed. There may be certain things like where people are highly disabled, things like that. There needs to be some kind of installment. They need to be the ones that are secured certain amounts of money into their to support them. Okay, so there is going to be this level of connection to them for a sustained period of time. I would imagine things like garbage and things like that, which would like garbage collection, which would be removed probably quite quickly. So basically, people would be just going about their day. They'll be going to work, but just finding out that from now on there is no tax. So people would have obviously a massive injection of money into their pockets, but then obviously at the same time they would now need to be very independent in the ways in which they provide themselves services. So out of this situation, people now have the opportunities to start their own businesses, like a garbage collection business, and provide a service for the people that have got the extra capital in their pockets to, what shall we say, to service them. So this is just one of the things that the current sort of Democratic Party would have to start to dwindle services, but obviously have some kind of measured approach. If they're in a very financial difficult spot, they may need to make some incredibly difficult decisions early on. But if they're in a fairly okay spot, then they can obviously say, okay, right, we've got companies need to just be prepared for this. We're going to start shutting down the garbage collectors in the next 6 months. So be very wary of that. There is a free service at the moment, but in this amount of time, we're going to have no service. So people better be registered to, and you may need to put out some certain advertising campaigns or something, whatever. I'm sure businesses will advertise themselves anyway, so you wouldn't even need to, the government wouldn't need to even let know that these services are going to be shut down anyway. But there would need to be this sort of mandate to say that in this amount of time, we're going to be shutting down this service. Please be very aware. You will need to now install your own private services. So this is a very important recalibration of an economy from tax redistribution and bureaucrat funding and everything else to this extremely heightened productive society. So it is an incredible wealth production level. So all the bureaucrats who are coming out of the governments now are actually producing government companies or producing goods for people and things like that. So there isn't any bureaucracy or any sort of you're not paying for politicians. So instantly you're going to find that there is a lot more wealth generation which is occurring, and there's things like less restrictions for people to start their own businesses, things like that. Obviously, the main thing is obviously the moral hazard. People need to be aware of people's ownership. So where you have the account ledger, people are owning people's bodies, people are owning things like the air quality and things like that. So you need to be a little bit wary where you start a business to what harm you may be doing to others, or other people's properties. But in essence, you will be okay in sense of just starting your own business and seeing how that goes. So you're going to see an incredible influx of entrepreneurialism. People, the youth are going to be entirely freed. The asset prices are going to be priced accordingly. As if you've had a massive fire sale of loads of land and airspace and everything else, there's going to be a lot of stuff to play around with. So you're going to have a lot of buildings. You're going to have a lot of land to produce goods on. There's going to be an incredible amount of stuff that you can produce. But you just need to be insured of it being environmentally friendly, because people own everything. It's just one of those things. You need to be environmentally friendly. You need to be, because you're going to have litigations of insurance companies coming back to you to say that you are damaging another person's property rights. This is the area, this is the point at which people's area is. There is definite signage of the quality of that person or the quality of the air. At this time, and we can really locate that the air quality has really gone down from this point in time to this point in time. It's all been registered on our insurance company, and it's been independently registered, all that kind of stuff. And you are liable to the costs in which this airspace has gone down. See, there is certain areas where insurance companies and lawyers still have a little place in this world. Um, but I can't solve the lawyers area because there is obviously a very important moral thing that in place here. When people want to do services and trades and really have provide good quality services to other people, I would imagine that there is going to be some fundamental system or independent system of people's ratings of the services of doing trades with each other. So you would have some kind of eBay system, and obviously you would want to have a very high trade system, high trader rating to your ownership, so people would love to trade with you, so you open yourself up to the biggest market, which inclined makes you as moral and as ethical and as non-polluting as possible. So everybody has to act within the accordance to not being negligible and being very aware of any damage that they're causing to other people. How incredible would that be? So, yeah, that is one of the little areas. Now there is. It ain't as quite as simple as some of the things I'm making it sound like. There is a lot of certain complications which occur in this system, and I need to highlight it. I would be very foolish just to outline that this is the way it should be done, and it's just very easy, and there's nothing else to really be done here. One of the issues is obviously if the country is bankrupt and there isn't any kind of money in the pot, you do have some incredibly dangerous situations which are occurring. There may need to be certain levels of charity. I mean, I guess the main thing here is that if you do turn it into an anarchic capitalist state, you are creating a massive level of production in society and a massive raise of living standards. So even if your country is completely screwed and has got no money or anything like that, if you did take on a anarcho-capitalist free market country, you would have an incredible amount of production level that charities would be able to organize pretty rapidly to pick up the slack of any people that were in great need or required food or things like that. So it's just an important thing to know. I know it's not the best answer, but obviously I can't really help a situation where we've got ourselves into this mess. We can probably still take out loans for food and go to international markets for loans and things like that, but obviously we do need to be a little bit wary of how international law works and how they can recover their goods. But I imagine that obviously, as we are a free market ownership country, we would still need to have international commerce and trade and be very mitigate ourselves, and insurance companies would need to work and help each other out to ensure that there is definite good trade which is occurring between two countries. And we do have obviously the issue of the use of force by opposite states. So if you did have a pot of money left over, you may still want to purchase private security armies if the state was under any kind of threat. You may need to own a certain level of mutually assured destruction weapons only, so that you know that if anybody tries to invade, you can just blow the hell them up, so that you can create mass destruction. But that means that it will be sort of good for it's the major deterrent. So you do have money there to purchase private security armies, and you do have money there to keep the nuclear bomb ready just in case anything particularly dangerous happens. But there needs to be some certain level of thinking of insurance and things like that for people who potentially will have obviously a lot more money to think and consider about having a major deterrent about states. But obviously, if this gets more widely and widely adopted, then we potentially would find that that you would need less so for military and private security services and missile defense deterrence and things like that. So that is probably, obviously, this is one of the areas of importance, and an area of one of the arguments is that if you try to invade a country that doesn't have any kind of state, obviously you've got this one little pool of money, this one little treasure, which another country or another people would want to get their money on, which there's a political power which is trying to work with less and less money. Maybe that could be fairly dangerous, but there isn't really sort of a secured area where you could claim taxes off people. Also, these people would have an incredible amount of money. People would be able to own guns, but within insurance terms. So the insurance companies, obviously, there's value for value. If you started to destroy people, then obviously you would be under incredible mitigated circumstances, and potentially even the insurance companies would have to take a hard line offensive attack on you if you decided to destroy other people because of the value cost that you are, or the cost that you are implementing on society. So yeah, it's very important in that sense, but yeah, defense is one of those interesting, well, not interesting, but very important factors in terms of this society. People can self-defend themselves, so people can have gun ownership if that you did have some kind of military force which was trying to invade. There needs to be some certain levels of insurance companies that watch other insurance companies that watch over independent companies, so that they have nuclear deterrence, things like that. So there is certain elements here which are very important. Okay, so there is one other area which I thought was fairly important that I just need to go into. So it's not like, I mean, obviously if I just break it down pretty quickly, it's sort of like a thing where you're installing a free market ownership system which is protected by cryptography, which is numbers itself. And people have the option to register themselves on there, and it needs to be highly unique. Once they're registered on that system, there will be a fire sale of all government assets. There's going to be a pot of a certain amount, and I guess that will be used over time by a democracy of government, where this fund or this pot will just be given out to them on a drip level until there's literally nothing left, and public services will dwindle, but in replacement of that, you will have free market ideas and government solutions. Sorry, not government solutions, free market solutions to government problems. So, which will raise the capital and make people owners, and yeah, this way you are obliterating the kleptocracy. You're obliterating the the unions. There isn't any major power and force, and there is a voluntary evaluation system in place to prevent any moral crimes. Okay, so another thing I just want to just explore, which is important, is the registry thing. So if somebody comes into this country or this area which has no real country marks, so you've got immigrants that come into this country, maybe you want to have border security for a certain amount of time, just in case there is certain delinquents or anything like that, which want to destabilize the country, or the area, the land area. Then you may want to keep in border security. That's just other things that I just want to mention there, just before you convert over to a complete anarchic society or anarchic capitalist society. So one of the things is that registry. So some people can obviously go around their day-to-day business without being registered on this this system. Now, I think this is a little bit of an issue here, because if you're not registered on the system, then you're going to have a fairly difficult way of trading, because you're going to have to trade by foreign accounts. So you're going to have to trade. You can obviously be a foreigner and visit this area, but you're going to have to trade via foreign accounts. So private ownership has to be converted over to a foreign account, and there needs to be trade and commerce via these areas. You do have a major issue that, as you're not registered on this system when you enter into the country, you there isn't certain protections of property rights upon your person. So when I say, obviously, people, if an insurance company had somebody registered and they murdered somebody that wasn't registered, obviously the insurance company would very much downgrade them and say that they're a bad person, and then trade, and a lot of things would go against them, and maybe even legal measures would be put against them as well. So they may even get something like the death penalty, capital punishment, whatever they did. But there is a lot of ambiguity if just some crazy immigrant who totally was off the register just arrived and somebody wanted to murder them, and there would be literally no recourse there. So it would be in some way kind of difficult and dangerous if you entered the country and you had no money and no identification or anything like that. It would be fairly dangerous. So there is a massive incentive for you to register onto the cryptography network, or this peer-to-peer voluntary network. If you didn't, you do have certain areas of risk, and you have definite certain things of inabilities to trade and certain human rights which potentially are missing. So this is important. So, and if you decided that if you had some crazed ass person that entered into the country and decided to murder people, that person would be obviously dealt with no issue whatsoever. He's got no rights whatsoever in the first place. It's just one of those things. And obviously, if you do have do register, you need to have your unique identification. It might need to go down to DNA. That this obviously does combat the issue of mass immigration. You're not going to get this massive influx of immigration. You might need to have border security for the start, but you're not going to really get a mass load of immigration at first if they know that there is no welfare for them. So they're going to have to find work in some means and ways before when they get there, or even before they get there. So they need to be ensured that when they get there, they're going to be working very hard, which is only going to be a good thing for the area itself, because people know that people are going to arrive there, they're going to be productive, they're going to try and create things, they're going to be entrepreneurial. So it's only going to increase to the GDP, or well, if you can say there's GDP, but to the area of production of the area. So yeah, it's if you did anything bad to another person, if you were registered and you did murder somebody else, obviously insurance would kick in, and potentially there would be a general agreement amongst a number of companies which would kick in and say, okay, well, this person has murdered this other person. This is an incredible loss. This person was valued at this price, and this person obviously is got no money or terms to pay this off. There is this liability which has occurred on the part of the insurance company. There may be things that are certain things which are written into the lines which are agreed by monetary levels as to if this was a particular crime of a very dastardly deed or something like that. It sounds pretty weird, but just something very malevolent and evil, then the insurance companies may have options in which to deal with you as economically as possible. I know it sounds very Orwellian, or a very courtocracy, but it is not necessarily like that. It's just a monetary value system. People are being valued in terms of their morality, in terms of their production, in terms of their virtue, if anything else. So not only if you're going to kill this high valued businessman, but if you kill this highly charitable person, there will be some incredible moral hazards in the valuation of that person. People would say that this is a highly rated person. What have you done? This is incredible loss. Yada yada yada. So it's the murder in insurance systems is very important. There's another important thing when I mention about this insurance and policing and militarization, that when it comes to policing, there isn't economies of scale. If I had this business of being a murder detection agency or even a larger one, it doesn't really help me to be this massive company. I can't really have more and more police force, and it's going to make me more economical. it really is more efficient for me to work with less and less resources. Therefore, there isn't the economies of scale for me to make this massive monopoly police force, which controls and dominates the anarcho system. So that's just one of the little areas of thought in terms of worrying about um, uh, the system of law and order and any repercussions of doing any immoral acts. So, yeah, I'm going to leave you on those thoughts and those ideas. This political party obviously has a lot of obstacles, and it needs to really churn over a lot of these ideas. And I think there definitely probably needs to be some improvement in terms of the idea of the registry and the cryptography, and how potentially how other insurance companies and rating agencies and independent agencies work in collaboration with this system, and how the owners, the fire sale assets get redistributed over time by some kind of ruling government, which is against obviously the anarchic system itself. But there is a lot of obstacles there, but there is certainly a very rosy situation in terms of having a government system which is forced to shut down, and finding that people are living now in a tax-free environment where they can produce plenty of goods and really not have any force to take anything away from them. And people are finding that they can set up a multitude of businesses in replacement to what the government is at this moment. So in essence, it is empower to the people, empowerment to productive working people. So thank you very much for your time. It's very pleasant and interesting to go over these theoretical ideas. If you think that you can improve on these ideas, or if you think that I am going into a massive problem, or there is a problem that I haven't really seen or explored, please let me know, and we can cover this in a later podcast. Thank you very much for your time, and I will speak again soon.